So let me ask you something. When the problem happens, when your erection isn't cooperating, do you have any sense at all of whether it's coming from your body or your mind? Because most men I talk to don't know. They genuinely don't know. And that's not a criticism. It's actually completely understandable, because from the inside in the moment, it can feel exactly the same either way. Your body isn't responding. That's all you know. And that feels like one thing. But here's what I've learned in 10 years of sitting with men in my practice, having this exact conversation. The cause matters enormously. Not just for your peace of mind, but for what you actually do about it. Because a physical problem and a psychological problem look similar on the surface, but they require completely different approaches. And the number of men I've seen spending months, sometimes years, trying to fix one thing when the real issue is something else entirely is genuinely heartbreaking to me. So today we are going to figure out which one you're dealing with. Together. Right now. And I promise you, by the end of this video, you will know, not approximately, not vaguely, you will have a clear enough picture to understand what you're actually working with and exactly where to put your energy. That clarity alone is going to feel like a weight lifted, because there is something uniquely exhausting about struggling with something you don't understand. And something uniquely empowering about finally being able to name it. Let's get into it. Oh, and if you're new here, welcome. I'm Dr. Valerie Hayes, and this is what I do on this channel every week. Real conversations about sex after 50. Practical, warm, honest. The kind of conversation most people aren't having anywhere else. If that sounds like what you've been looking for, hit the subscribe button right now and come join us. Okay, let's go. Now, before I walk you through the assessment, I want to spend a few minutes making sure you actually understand what we're distinguishing between. Because physical and psychological are words that can feel clinical and a bit distant, and I want to bring them close. I want you to feel the difference, not just understand it intellectually. A physical erection problem means that something in the body's hardware is creating resistance. The blood vessels, the nerves, the hormonal signals, the cardiovascular system, somewhere in that physical chain there is friction. The signal is being sent, but something is interrupting the delivery. And when I say physical, I don't want you to hear serious, or permanent, or broken. Physical simply means the obstacle has a biological address. A psychological erection problem means the hardware is completely intact. The blood vessels are fine, the nerves are functional, the capacity is there. But the software, the mental and emotional environment that has to be in place for arousal to happen is creating interference. Anxiety, anticipation of failure, stress, distraction, the weight of past experiences. These are not imaginary. They are real forces that produce real physical outcomes. A thought can constrict a blood vessel. A fear can suppress a hormone. The mind and the body are not two separate things operating independently. They are one system, talking to each other constantly. And then there is the third possibility, which I want to name clearly, because it is actually the most common one, and the one most men never hear about. A combination of both. A physical vulnerability that has been amplified by a psychological response to it. The body created a small problem. The mind turned it into a large one, and now they are feeding each other in a loop that feels impossible to break. Understanding which of these three you're dealing with is not just useful, It is the entire foundation of finding your way through. So let me tell you what each one actually looks and feels like from the inside. When the problem is predominantly physical, there are certain patterns that tend to show up consistently. The difficulty happens regardless of your mental state, whether you're relaxed and confident or anxious and pressured. The result is roughly the same. There is no version of the situation where things are working reliably. It happens with a new partner and with a long-term partner. It happens when you're feeling great about yourself and when you're not. It happens in the morning, when performance pressure is lowest and arousal should be at its most natural. The problem, in other words, follows you everywhere. It doesn't seem to respond to the emotional context. You may also notice that even your spontaneous erections, the ones that happen without any sexual context at all, have become less frequent or less firm than they used to be. Morning erections particularly. That's your body's own overnight test of its erectile function, and when those become rare or absent, that's meaningful information. Now, when the problem is predominantly psychological, the pattern is almost the opposite. There are situations where things work perfectly fine, alone almost always, with certain partners more than others, when you're relaxed and the pressure is off, versus when the stakes feel higher. You might notice that the problem tends to arrive at a very specific moment, not at the beginning of arousal, but later, when performance becomes more of a conscious thought, or it's worse with someone new than with someone familiar, or it got started after one particularly difficult experience and never quite went back to normal after that. The key signature of a psychological pattern is variability. It comes and goes depending on context. It responds to your emotional state. On a good day in a low-pressure situation with the right person, things can work just fine, and that tells you something very important about where the real obstacle lives. Now, are you starting to recognize yourself in one of those descriptions? Hold that feeling, because now I want to walk you through the actual assessment. This is the part I promised you, the 60 seconds, and I want you to take this seriously, not as a party trick, but as a genuine moment of honest self-reflection. There are no wrong answers here. There is only information, and information is the beginning of everything. I'm going to ask you a series of questions. I want you to answer them privately, in your own mind, as honestly as you can. Don't answer the way you wish things were. Answer the way things actually are. Ready? Great. First question. When you're alone, completely alone, no partner, no pressure, no performance required, does your body respond normally? Can you get and maintain an erection without difficulty in that context? If the answer is yes, that is significant. It tells you the physical capacity is present. The hardware is working. What changes between that moment and the moments where it isn't working is the context. And context is psychological territory. But if the answer is no, if even alone, without any pressure at all, things are consistently unreliable, that points more strongly toward a physical component that deserves attention. Second question. Think about the last several times the problem occurred. Was there a pattern in the circumstances? Did it tend to happen with a particular partner, or in a particular emotional state, or when you were tired or stressed or had been drinking? Or did it seem to happen randomly, regardless of those factors? Patterns tied to circumstances, tied to who you're with, how you're feeling, what kind of day you've had. These are the fingerprints of a psychological component. and randomness that ignores context is more suggestive of something physical. Third question, and this one I want you to sit with for a moment. When did this start? Was there a specific event, a single difficult experience, a period of high stress, a relationship change, something that happened and then things were never quite the same afterward? Or did it come on gradually, slowly, over months or years with no clear starting point? A clear starting point, especially one tied to an experience or a period of emotional difficulty, is one of the strongest indicators of a psychological origin. A slow, gradual onset with no clear trigger tends to point more toward the natural, physical changes of aging combined with underlying health factors. And to the fourth question, on your best days, the days when you feel good about yourself, when you're relaxed, when you're with someone you feel genuinely comfortable with, is the problem still present, or does it ease significantly? If your best days are also your best bedroom days, that variability is telling you something important about where the real work needs to happen. Now, based on how you've just answered those 4 questions in your own mind, what are you sensing? What picture is forming? If most of your answers pointed toward the first descriptions, reliable difficulty regardless of context, absent morning erections, gradual onset, I want you to make an appointment with your doctor. I'm not saying something is terribly wrong, but you deserve an accurate physical assessment. Cardiovascular health, testosterone levels, blood pressure, medications. These are all factors that a doctor can evaluate and address. You would not ignore a persistent issue anywhere else in your body. Don't ignore this one. Then, if most of your answers pointed toward the second descriptions, variability, context dependence, a clear starting point, the problem responding to your emotional state, then the most important work you can do is psychological and behavioral, and there is enormous, well-researched, consistently effective work available to you in that space. Work I talk about in depth throughout this channel. And if you're sitting there thinking, honestly, it feels like both, then you are in the majority. You are in the most common category of all. And the path forward for you involves addressing both sides simultaneously, which is absolutely possible, and which more men than you'd imagine have done successfully. The point is this: you now know something you didn't know 40 minutes ago. You have a clearer picture of your own situation, and that picture changes everything about how you move forward. Now I want to address something directly, because I know what some of you just felt when your answers pointed toward the psychological side of this. I know because I've seen it in my office on the faces of men who are hearing this for the first time. There's a particular kind of discomfort that comes with the suggestion that something might be psychological, and I understand it completely. Because our culture has taught men that psychological means not real, that if it's in your head, it's somehow less legitimate, less serious, that it means you're weak or overthinking, or that you should just be able to pull yourself together and get on with it. I want to dismantle that completely. A psychological cause is not a lesser cause. It is not weakness. It is not imaginary. The anxiety that constricts blood flow to your penis is producing a physical outcome as real and measurable as anything a doctor could point to on a scan. The performance loop that keeps rebuilding itself is a neurological pattern as concrete as any physical condition. The mind does not live in a separate universe from the body. They are one system. And when the mind is in distress, the body shows it. In some ways, and I say this genuinely, a psychological cause is actually the more hopeful finding, because the mind is extraordinarily responsive to the right input. Bodies sometimes have limitations that require management. Minds can be genuinely transformed. The patterns that the brain learns, it can also unlearn. The associations that have built up over months or years of difficult experiences can be rebuilt, rewired, replaced with something completely different. I have watched men in my practice, men who had lived with this for years, who had accepted it as permanent, who had quietly shrunk their lives around it. I have watched those men come back to full, confident, joyful sexual function through psychological and behavioral work alone, not a supplement, not a procedure, understanding, and the right approach. So if your answers pointed you toward the psychological side, I don't want you to feel defeated. I want you to feel relieved, because you now know where the door is. I want to close with something that I think is important. A lot of men come to this question, physical or psychological, hoping desperately for the answer to be physical, because physical feels more respectable somehow, more defensible, less like something they should have been able to control. And some men come to it hoping the answer is psychological, because psychological means the body isn't failing. The fundamental machinery is intact. What I want you to take from today is this: neither answer is the good one or the bad one. Both are simply true or not true, and what matters is what you do with the truth. A man who gets an accurate diagnosis and acts on it is a man moving towards something better. A man who avoids the question stays exactly where he is. You just did the harder thing. You asked the question. You sat with the answers. Now you know where you stand. And knowing where you stand is how you decide where you're going. That is not a small thing. That is everything. And 2 things before you go. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do that right now. It genuinely helps this channel reach more men who need these conversations, and it means you won't miss a single video. I release something new every week, and I would love for you to be here for it. And the second thing, drop a comment below. I want to know where you landed. Did your answers point you toward physical, psychological, or that combination of both that so many men find themselves in? You don't have to share details. Even just one word tells me something. And it tells the men reading the comments that they are not alone in whatever they're sitting with. This is a community, and communities are built one honest comment at a time. I'll see you in the next video. Take good care.